US National Cooperative Bank and also chair of the Community Development Financial Institutions Coalition. And I think I'm right in saying that in 2019, John, you were the recipient of the Stanley W. Dreyer Spirit of Cooperation Award, which is presented annually to those people who most articulate and are the role models for upholding cooperative principles. So congratulations for that, John. NCB's mission includes supporting low-income communities, and I'm sure we'll hear more about that, and also to advocate for and support the expansion of cooperative initiatives in the US. And we're looking forward to hearing about that too. I think given that our conference focus is on cooperative politics, policies and practices, and given the global context in which we're meeting in terms of building back better, looking at emphasizing the importance of sustainability, cooperation and collaboration, then it's, I think, timely to hear from you, John, about the National Cooperative Bank, particularly in these uncertain times, economic and social. So I welcome you, John, to our community, and I'll hand over the space to you. I know you want to get people involved in discussion. We're looking at sort of 45 minutes, 15 minutes left of the session, and I'll hand it over to you. Welcome, John.
Thank you so much, Madam Chairwoman, and thank you to everyone who's had an opportunity to attend today. I may cut that 45 minutes back just a little bit because, again, I think for me, while me making remarks, obviously, is a big part of this first hour, I'm really more so looking forward to a possible discussion at the end, questions and answers, and talking about anything that you all want to talk about. You know, I want to thank the trustees. I want to thank the conference committee and having a chance to work with Rory and everyone for having me here today. Who would have thought that me meeting Nick Matthews in Rwanda at the International Cooperative Alliance meeting would allow me to have the high honor of being the opening keynote here today. And so for that, I'm extremely grateful. And on behalf of the board of directors of the National Cooperative Bank, including our board chair, Maurice Smith, who leads the local government federal credit union, and our CEO, Chuck Snyder, I want to definitely bring you greetings here from the United States. As the chairwoman said, my name is John Holdsclaw, and I do work at the National Cooperative Bank. As a part of some of my responsibility, I am charged with the thought process, thought leadership, and business development around community development finance, as well as cooperative expansion. And so you'll hear a little bit more about that when we get to it. So what I'm going to do right now is share my screen and pull up my presentation here, if you all don't mind. Bear with me. It'll kind of just help me follow along with some of my remarks, if that's okay. So there again. So, you know, one of the things we like to say at the National Cooperative Bank is that we're working together to build community. It's a big thing to us. We feel like we're not just a financial institution, but we're a part of the community. Now, we have a national reach. Sometimes those communities can be a little bigger than others, but at the same time, it's something that we really take to heart. And we believe that each relationship that we have from a business standpoint starts one handshake at a time. And so it's something that has really driven the organization through the course of time. I've been there total, if you think about me being at the nonprofit and being at the bank, I've been there for 19 years, going on 20 years. And so we really believe strongly in the whole building together, working together, building communities piece. For many of you who don't know, the National Cooperative Bank was started in 1978, passed by an act of Congress. It passed by one vote. And so you can imagine that everybody who voted for the bill took credit for that one vote. And what happened when President Reagan came in 1980, he started cutting programs that the bank decided to privatize and become its own entity. We had 1988, we expanded to get a old savings and loan that we purchased in the southwestern part of Ohio and called it our first savings bank. To expand our services in 2014, we expanded to a national charter. And so today We are owned by our more than 3,100 customers who all, help us in our success. 2.8 billion plus in assets, with about 7.7 billion under management. So that's a little bit of the NCB story. Core focus of areas, obviously mission-owned, member-owned, mission-driven organizations, housing co-ops, healthcare. We do a lot of community facilities, worker co-ops, food co-ops, small business co-ops, and any kind of community-focused enterprises. One of the things that we also do is we do a lot of work with Alaska Native corporations, and while they're not necessarily co-ops per se, they are under democratic control. And so we've had a relationship with those Alaska Native corporations for more than 20 years now, and take a great deal of pride in that area of focus that we work in. Co-op development as well is also a big component of what we do at the bank. Over the last 5 years, we've provided more than 100 million in grants or loans or investments in initiatives like the food co-op initiatives, trying to bring more food co-ops to the US here. Project Equity, which really works with companies who have, aging owners who want to get out of the business, but the workers want to buy the business, and so they help them make the transition to being worker co-op owned business. We do a lot of work with the Community Purchasing Alliance here, and my colleague Ann Fedorchak here is in the bottom here giving a check to the Shared Capital Cooperative, which is another one of these community development financial institutions that we work with. And as the chairwoman said, I do wear two hats. While working at the bank, I also do chair the board of the CDFI Coalition, and I'm unsure if you have those in the UK, but in 1994, these community development financial institutions, or CDFIs as we call them, were formed to try to find a way to expand economic opportunity in low-income communities by providing people access to financial products and services that in many ways a mainstream bank would not allow them to have. And so 13 years prior to coming to the bank, I worked for the bank's former affiliate, which is called Capital Impact Partners, which is one of these CDFIs, which is where I really cut my teeth in community economic development. I always tell people, I really don't see myself as a banker. I really see myself as a community development finance person as opposed to being a banker. I even jokingly call myself a community economic development nerd just because of how important the issue means to me. And so CDFIs, there are more than 1,100 across the country. The coalition represents many of them. We do our best on Capitol Hill to make sure that the US Congress is providing them with the needed resources in regards to financial assistance, technical assistance, new markets tax credits, so they can continue to make impact in these low income, low wealth communities. All of my work is in low, moderate income communities. I don't do anything market rate. So again, it's a labor of love for me, being someone who comes from very humble beginnings and having the opportunity to impact these communities on a regular basis is something that really drives me in this cooperative space. And with that, one of the things we're very proud of is the bank, per our congressional charter, has a very uncommon mandate that states that we must make best efforts that 35% of all of our disbursements be in low and moderate income communities. And so, for example, in 2019, the bank did $352 million in these communities. And we're talking about housing, cooperative housing, again, working with the native CDFIs, health centers, working with credit unions, food co-ops, healthcare. We do a lot in renewable energy, providing small business loans as well as grants. And so, while I'm proud of every aspect of what we do as a financial institution, this is the work that is really very near and dear to my heart because of the community development aspect of it, but because it also has cooperative development and expansion wrapped into it. So we're very proud of that every year, and produce a report called the Mission Report that basically highlights all of this work and the impact that we have. So the deals aren't always easy because we try to do as much as we can to mitigate the risk because of the borrowers and the communities, and these are folks obviously that have gone to other mainstream banks and been turned away, and we try to do all that we can from an innovative financial standpoint to make these opportunities come to light. Get rid of that. A couple of things, obviously proud of where I work, some of the things we've had a chance to do over the last couple of years. Washington Post top workplaces, best employers in Ohio, nation's best and brightest award in 2017. We were honored with an award for some of the financial education things that we do through a platform called EverFi. We got an award from the American Bankers Association in regards to some of our work in affordable housing. And we have a very, I feel, generous adoption family friendly workplace where we provide incentives also as well, proper time off for individuals if they go through the process of adopting a child. Dave Thomas, who, if many of you don't know, is the man who founded the fast food restaurant here in the US called Wendy's, and he was adopted himself and was a longtime proponent of supporting adoption. Probably preaching to the choir here, but if you look at the world cooperative landscape, 12% of humanity is a part of any of the 3 million co-ops in the world. If you look at the impact of the 3 largest co-ops, you know, 2 billion plus in US dollars, and they contribute, I mean, 280 million people around the globe. That's just an amazing statistic to me, or 10% of the world's employed population. These are more than likely pre-pandemic numbers, and so I don't know what they are now, but definitely really strong numbers. If you look at it from a US standpoint, there are 29,000 cooperatives that operate in every sector here, obviously creating many jobs, 7,500 credit unions. You know, I'm a member of the local government federal credit union here in my area. My father worked for the housing authority for many years in my hometown, and I joined, and it was one of the best things that I ever done as a member owner of the credit union. And our board chair right now, Marby Smith, actually heads the local government federal credit union. So we often joke with each other that I work for you on one day, and then the next day you work for me. So we jokingly say that as me being a member of his cooperative and him being the on our board. So, you know, farming, you're looking at electricity. Rural electric co-ops are doing some amazing things right here, right now in the U.S. You've got co-op owned and affiliated insurance, telephone cooperatives, and I think one of the unsung heroes of this pandemic for a lot of people in the U.S. right now has been the work of these cooperative childcare or early care and education facilities across the country, because many parents who don't either have the money to pay for some childcare are now starting these cooperatives that allow them to go back to work as their young children are being cared for. You know, it's so very important. I have a 14-year-old, so at the end of this talk, if any of you have any advice for me about raising a 14-year-old, I would gladly I will gladly take that advice. I know I was a 14-year-old at one time. It just seems like it's a little different then. But so getting to the final stretch here about the bank. You know, we put out a report every year, the Co-op 100. This year's is not yet done, almost, it's there. But we try to list the top revenue earning co-ops in the US. 2018, 222 billion US dollars, very prominent ones, REI, Land O'Lakes, some of the others. Once the report is out, I will send it over to Nick and to Rory so that they can distribute it to everyone, as well as you can go to ncb.coop to see it. Example of a few: Navy Federal, Equal Exchange, Ace Hardware, Cabot, Co-Bank, REI, the housing, the housing piece you see there is a housing cooperative. It's one of the oldest in the country, called Amalgamated, located in New York City. It was created to house union workers during the early 1900s. We still have a great relationship with them today and finance a lot of their work. So enough about the bank. So you know all you need to know about NCB, the National Cooperative Bank. And now I want to kind of move into some of the other parts of my discussion. You know, as we look at the world right now, and we look at the policies, and we look at all of the things that are happening, you know, co-ops have a rich history in the U.S. and around the world in regards to being parts of many movements. One of my favorite stories that is very rarely heard is about this co-op on a little known island on the coast of South Carolina called the Progressive Club. This gentleman here, Mr. Jenkins, was the person who started the Progressive Club. And I think that this picture to me really captures, you know, not only his influence, but just the happiness and joy of people who probably at that time were probably living in some very humble means. And so Mr. Jenkins in 1948, with the help of about 40 families from Johns Island, South Carolina, established this consumer co-op and a mutual aid organization in a very old school building with hopes of selling everything from groceries to gasoline and whatnot. And so as time went on, they would use this Progressive Club as a way to register voters. They would use this as a way to get people more involved in their community. Their work then in 1948 in the 1950s probably would be just as important today as it was back in those days. And so back during the Jim Crow laws of this country, which were some of our darkest days post-slavery, to be able to vote, you had to pass a literacy test. And so if you could not read, you could not vote. And they had poll taxes, they had all these other things to try to discourage Black people at that time from voting. And so one of the things that the Progressive Club did was they would have long bus rides to and from the island. They would have people at the club, but they would have actual literacy training or trying to teach people to read. So when the time came, they would be able to pass the literacy test. And so as time went on from 48 to 52 to 57, they started what was called the Citizenship School, which ended up growing. The co-op ended up having more than 400 members in many different places, and they had to expand. But when the Civil Rights movement hit around 1963, the Progressive Club and the work of it in the South became very important to Dr. Martin Luther King, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, Ambassador Andrew Young, and many others. And they started hundreds of these citizenship schools throughout the South using the Progressive Club as a model. And millions of Black Americans at that time were able to learn to read, pass these literacy tests, and work. And so you have this very humble co-op shop selling gasoline, selling groceries, doing all of these things that would end up going on being so influential in the South and being one of the greatest unknown stories being told throughout the civil rights. And I guarantee you, you got folks in South Carolina that can't even tell you anything about the Progressive Club just because of its anonymity from to some degree, because many people do not remember it. The picture on the right there is what's left of the original sign. There's a marker there to give the historical context around the club. And then what's left of the club is what you all see there on the right. And there's been an effort to try to bring it back and build it back to its original form, because it was put on the National Register of Historic Places in 2007. And so, you know, I say all that to say that while co-ops have this rich history of policy and being in movements around the world, that's just a small snippet of what's happening or what has happened here in the US. But something that you won't hear much about at all. And I always get a great joy when I get a chance to tell that story about the Progressive Club, because again, I think if we had more progressive clubs in this world today, we may not have as many of the problems as we have. So I'm going to show you all what Capitol Hill looks like today. If you haven't been reading newspapers or seeing what's on the news, this is a great example of what's happening in DC. This doesn't even include the White House. You've got the Capitol building and gridlock and beep, 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 and all of that. I always show this because it literally is just like this right now, with nothing moving and such a toxic environment. But there are some victories, and there are some things that we've been able to do as a bank over the last several years. For many years, there's a federal program called the Small Business Administration, which provides loan guarantees for small businesses. I think when I talk to Rory, you all have something similar, but it refers to small firms there in the UK. And so what had happened since the 60s, food co-ops were ineligible to participate in these loan guarantee programs. I mean, they're small businesses, but they were unable to participate. And one of the programs that they wanted to use was a 7A business 7A program, which would provide much needed working capital with guarantees for small businesses to be open, therefore, mitigating the risk for many banks. And the entire cooperative community in the 60s and the 70s and the 80s, 90s, all tried to get this done. We took up the mantle with other folks in the cooperative movement here in the US. And the Main Street Ownership Act was introduced in 2019 and passed. We were able to work with the chair people of the House Small Business Committee. And there was a report that came out that still had a little glitch in it that needed to be fixed, because they wanted to resolve some type of personal guarantee issue. So we asked that the committee hold a small business committee hearing on the passage of the program and how food co-ops could not use the program. And so my colleague, R.L. Condra, who is a teammate of mine, went before Congress and testified on the importance of the program and what positive changes needed to be made. He's there with Congresswoman Nydia Velázquez from New York, who is the chairwoman now of the Small Business Administration Committee. We worked very hard to have a great relationship with that office. And so the fix was able to be made, and the bank has gone on and closed the first food co-op SBA loan in the history of this country with the Fredericksburg Food Co-op. I didn't have a current picture, I only had this mock-up, but we closed that loan on April 2nd, 2020. Was the first loan under this program for a food co-op. It was $4 million in cost, 10,000 square foot, cooperatively owned natural and organic retail store. And so, that's a perfect example of, we getting involved, us getting involved, us seeing it through the process, and then us taking that and being able to produce the first loan under that program. And I can't commend my colleague R.L. Condra enough, as well as the work of the entire cooperative movement in the US to get that done. We're now hoping that other banks will start to do a little bit more and more about this and do more of these food co-op SBA loans. Many of you may have heard about the Paycheck Protection Program that came down after the pandemic started, that would allow small businesses to at least keep their workers on the payroll. And at the end of all this, that the Small Business Administration would forgive all those loans if all the criteria were met. It's a little hiccup right now with some of this forgiveness. So you got a lot of nervous banks around the country, but that's the US federal government, and should really come as no surprise to anyone. So for example, the SBA was able to do more than 5 million loans, $525 million. The CDFIs that I represent on the CDFI Coalition 432 lenders there, $16 million, primarily all in low and moderate income communities. And mind you, we had to get another bill passed just to allow CDFIs to take part in that. And community development banks, community development credit unions that you'll hear about later, and community development loan funds. You know, you're talking about the average loan size for CDFIs was $101,000, which really kept a lot of these small businesses afloat throughout this entire time. NCB also took part in this. We had 234 loans, the majority of which went to cooperatives, co-op organization. Many of our members like Ace Hardwares and Dunkin' Donuts to allow them to keep their doors open. We did $84 million. Overall, from folks besides us, from a cooperative standpoint, there were over 1,800 that received on an average of $150,000 or greater, which therefore preserved 93,000 jobs. So while the program was greatly successful and was able to save and keep many people on the payroll, the one thing that I would say, or a knock against the program is that it did not necessarily reach down to all Black and Latinx or Black and brown businesses as it possibly could have. And so that was a little disheartening, but I think that the Small Business Administration tried to address that by allowing CDFIs to become lenders. So with that, and I'm sure that you have heard nothing about this at all. I'm being sarcastic about the civil unrest here in the United States and whatnot. It has definitely been an extremely trying time. This piece here is coming right down what I think is either 16th Street up by the White House. It was a peaceful protest, obviously, but I wanted to just give everyone an idea of some of the disparities that many people are facing here in the United States. One of the things that I also lead for the bank is I lead our diversity, equity, and inclusion program here. And diversity, equity, and inclusion, or racial equity and things of that nature are becoming more and more important here in the US as time has gone on. And this is all before some of these tragedies that people have faced here in our country. But just to paint a picture for you here about some of the disparities here, you know, Black and Latinx people are 3 times more than likely to contract the coronavirus. 20% of all the essential workers in this country, many of whom are Black or Latinx, live in poverty, and many of them rely on 40% rely on public assistance. Many Black Americans have not recovered from the recession. Think about this: when the 1968 Fair Housing Act was passed in 1968, the U.S. 42% of all Black Americans own their homes. So here we are many years later, and we have 42% of Black Americans own their homes. And so it's just as low today as it was when that bill was passed in 1968. 47.5% of Latinx own their own homes. This is another striking one to me. Black men make up 6.5% of the total United States adult population, but they make up 43% of the prison population. So you got 2.3 million prisoners incarcerated here in the United States, and Black men make up 43% of those, while they only make up 6.5% of the total adult population of this country. You know, I always tell my wife in the community we live in, sometimes my son will go up and play on the basketball goal and whatnot, and I find myself a lot of times every 15 or 20 minutes or so leaving the house and walking up to the top of the cul-de-sac just to check on him to make sure that everything is okay. And that's obviously the father in me, but that's obviously also a reflection of the world we live in right now here in the US. Additional disparities, Latinx folks have lower rates of health insurance. There was a research paper done by UC Santa Cruz that found that throughout this pandemic, nearly 41% of all Black-owned businesses are more than likely going to shut their doors, compared to 17% of white-owned businesses. And then back to the PPP part, or as well as folks applying for assistance, only 12% of people who have actively tried to get temporary funding from the federal government, only 12%, or 1 out of 10 of Black and Latinx small business owners were able to get that assistance. And so that just outlines some of the disparities, number one. And so what is the cooperative community doing about it? And what I wanted to highlight was one area, because I am a community development finance person, and I get a chance to work a lot with community development bankers as well as community development credit unions. I really wanted to spotlight the work of community development credit unions. A community development credit union has the mission of serving low and moderate income people in their communities. They're represented by a great organization called Inclusive. They represent them. Now, there are thousands of credit unions around the world, but there is a very small subset, probably below 500 of these community development credit unions, or low income credit unions, as they're called in this country. And they're primarily the groups that I work the most with, because they are these community development financial institutions. And so let's see how they have worked to address some of these disparities. And so Inclusive has 10 million, their members serve 10 million residents from all across the country, native reservations, rural, urban, and they hold about 112 billion in assets. They recently formed this minority credit union resilience grant that provided 59 minority designated credit unions and cooperativas, which are located in Puerto Rico, with grants to try to help them stay afloat during these times, out of a $1 million fund. They also participated in PPP, 90 members total, $1 million totally funded. 23 of those 90, and I don't know what the percentage is, were minority designated or were run by people of color, 80 CDFIs total. And so they were able to be on the front lines of trying to provide PPP loans to Black and brown people in communities. I heard so many stories of people who would try to call some of the bigger mainstream banks and just get caught into some loop and get bounced around to this 800 number, to that 800 number, because they were more concerned with helping their larger clients. I don't know if you all follow American football, but Tom Brady is one of the greatest quarterbacks in NFL history. He's won 6 Super Bowls, and he was able to get a PPP loan. The guy's probably signed more than $150 million or more in NFL contracts, as well as endorsements, but he was able to get a PPP loan to pay his employees of a company that he owned. So NCB was able to do it as well. And so just coming to a close here, there are other co-op policy things afloat here, the worker co-ops here, NCBA, CLUSA, and others have a hashtag co-ops vote campaign going on. There's a co-op Cincy Business Legacy Fund. There's going to be an outstanding cooperative economy bill, hopefully coming out of the California Assembly in 2021, that's going to help worker co-ops there. We got a call a couple of weeks ago from Senator Chuck Schumer's office, the minority leader here in the Senate, in regards to his desire to put together a possible comprehensive co-op bill. And then co-ops are banding together. The post office has really had a bad rap here lately. Co-ops are banding together there to try to help support them in some of the endeavors that they have going on right now. And I say all this to say that when you look at the numbers from a worldwide standpoint, when you look at the numbers here in the US, it was once said about CDFIs that CDFIs started out as an idea, then they became a movement, and then now they're an industry. And so while co-ops go back to the 1800s and have been around for a long time, they too started out as an idea. They are a movement, and then many people can say now that co-ops are a industry. And so I push back on both premises around CDFIs and co-ops because I want co-ops to stay a movement. I feel strongly that the movement component of that will always keep us striving and always keep us fighting in regards to concern for community, one member, one vote and the democratic process, because I feel like they can provide affordable housing, they can provide food security, they can provide gainful employment for people through worker co-ops, they can provide healthcare, they can provide childcare. And so it's not only co-ops throughout the world's job to basically provide those services and those member opportunities, it's also co-ops' jobs to become advocates. It's our job to go out and fight all the injustices in the world. Lord knows there's enough of them. And so, when I talk to folks here in the US, and now I'm honored obviously to talk to folks in the UK, that, it's a call to action, and that we must all harness cooperatively ourselves together to fight these injustices and do what's right for all of our member owners, as well as people who are unaware of co-ops. We must continue to do more. There's one of my favorite artists in the world is a artist by the name of Kadir Nelson. I definitely would ask anybody to please Google him. He does some amazing work, and this picture of his is one of my favorites. It's called After the Storm. And you don't really know what people are looking at, but it's after the storm, and they're looking forward. They may be hopeful, they may be faithful, but what you see there is a very diverse group of people, ages, nationalities, and everything. And so I look at that picture a lot, because when I have those days where I feel like I'm pushing a rock up a hill, I truly feel like this photo gives me inspiration. I put a quote in that co-op news interview that talked about, no matter what ship we came on, we're all here together. That's one of my favorite quotes. My second one is by Robert Kennedy that says, and he gave this in Cape Town, each time a man stands up for an ideal or acts to improve and I'll say anytime a man or a woman stands up for an ideal or acts to improve the lot of others or strikes out injustice, they send forth a tiny ripple of hope, and crossing each other from a million different centers of energy, and daring these ripples to build a current which can sweep down the mightiest walls of oppression and resistance. And I want to call on co-ops all around the world to work to build those ripples, to build those currents, so that we can fight injustice and continue to provide quality services and opportunities for our member owners. And so with that, thank you. And I look forward to any discussion that we have with the allotted time that I have left, Madam Chairwoman.
That's great. Thanks, John. And we have got some, raised hands there, which is great. And we've got a question from David Smith, who posted it on the chat. But if you want to make yourself known, David, and ask your question.
Thank you, Chair. I was very moved by the last part of what John had to say about activism. So my question that was posted prior to that remark, I think probably pretty timely. And my question is, it is said that the purpose of the cooperative movement is to create cooperatives. Would John agree? And if so, how successful have you been in this respect? And could you also touch upon the role and success of cooperative learning programs?
Great question, David. I want you to know that you were a big part of my speech, because you were one of the people that I could see consistently. so I gauged a lot of my action. I said, well, if David seems engaged, I have to be doing halfway decent. So thank you for that throughout the speech. Great question. I mean, I'll say this to you. In the US, we have spent a lot of time trying our best to raise the level of visibility and education around cooperatives in this country. One of my favorite stories is I'll go on Capitol Hill, because I was, again, a lobbyist for 20 years before coming over to the business development side. And somebody would say to me, a staffer would say to me, well, John, tell us what a co-op is. And the first thing I would ask them is, it says, well, do you have an account with the Senate Federal Credit Union, or do you have an account with the Congressional Federal Credit Union? And they would say, oh yes, I love the Senate FCU and the Congressional FCU. Then I would say to them, that's a co-op. And they would look like somebody had surprised them because they didn't know. They didn't know that they were member owners of that co-op. You know, they might have shopped at a food co-op around the corner instead of going to Whole Foods or some of these other places, never even making the connection. And so I feel, David, one of the biggest challenges that we have, and I can say this in the US and I could possibly assume this in the UK, is that we have to do a better job of telling our story. Listen, Senator Schumer can introduce this comprehensive co-op bill. We can have congressional briefings on it and hearings, but it's just a start. And, you know, that's just the lawmakers. There's also, you know, what we have to do to people here, because they have to understand that while there's no affordable housing in DC, in America, there are limited equity co-ops there that are providing people with home ownership, affordability, and everything else, but nobody even knows about it. My project partner from grad school lives in a 2-bedroom a co-op, her and her daughter in DC, right off the 13th Street corridor. She pays $534 a month. Now, I couldn't rent a closet for $534 a month in that area unless it was a limited equity co-op. So there's much more work to be done with that. David, what was the second part of your question? Because I turned 50 last year, so my memory is not as good as it used to be. What was it?
I think maybe we all have that problem. I just wonder if you could touch on the role and success of cooperative learning programs.
Okay. Well, and here again, one of the questions that was asking me in the co-op news is that, you know, what do conferences like this achieve? I feel like, you know, you've got programs all across the world, the St. Mary's, other programs that have self-standing either certificate programs or degree programs. And while those are great, I think that, you know, conferences like this, next week, NCBA CLUSA is having their big conference with hopefully 600 or 700 cooperators coming to that. You've got other opportunities on a statewide level. CUNA, with the credit union folks, have theirs. There's an African American Alliance for credit union employees. And so my thing is, I think they're all very important, and I think that we need to have more. But one of the more exciting things about what they do at NCBA is that they have what they call emerging cooperators or young cooperators or people who they, you know, CUNA has what they call the crashers, you know, people who are young in this movement right now. And they really try to encourage them to keep the crash mentality. But if you think about it, they're the future cooperators of the world, you know? And so I think that while we need to continue to hold these conferences and have these kind of discussions, we also have to continue to start thinking about the emerging leaders or the potential emerging leaders in the cooperation movement. Because, you know, truth be told, they'll get this stuff before we will, you know, a lot of us, because again, of all the things that they have access to and the technology tools and things of that nature. I mean, I got some friends that won't shop at Whole Foods or some of these other places because they're big business or they're owned by Amazon, and how much money does Amazon need, that kind of a thing. And so we go to Weaver Street Co-op, not far from where I live, and it does just fine for me. I'm member 22579, and I'm very proud of that. So great question, David, and thank you for allowing me to read your body during the discussion there.
Ian Hewitt, next question, please.
Right, well, thanks for a great speech and inspiring. I've got a picture over my shoulder by a bloke called Walter Crane. I don't know if you can see it. It's a picture of a woman holding a tree, and that's the Cooperative Commonwealth, which was a neat idea, I think. But I'm wondering how your bank survived when our bank was wiped out following the sort of 2016. I think that the bankers over here got their retaliation in early and made life difficult. But I understand the mechanism was a bit similar to Washington Mutual. There's a book called The Lost Bank about Washington Mutual. which was the biggest bank failure in the States. And the Co-op Bank here was saddled with a big building society called Britannia, which went belly up. Now, apparently in the US, what your president did was break the law and the losses didn't accrue. But what happened over here was our financial services people, wiped us out. And so our bank, the Co-op Bank, is owned by hedge funds and vulture funds currently, which is a bit of a shame. So how did you dodge the bullet? And what should we do?
First and foremost, Ian, can you email me the name of that poster to Rory so he can get it to me, because I'd love to get a copy. Yeah. So, listen, that's a great question, and I'll definitely have to pick that book up. I mean, first and foremost, the bank is. I mentioned to you all earlier about us becoming a national bank, and we became a national bank. We ended up getting a new regulator, and that new regulator came in, and as we say in the South, gave us a good whooping because of some things and some policies that we did not necessarily have in place. We've addressed all of those, and so, but what I think it taught us is that we needed to have more contingencies and a better continuity plan. All said, what you don't hear about in the UK is that the Federal Reserve here, which is basically the government's bank, has basically flooded trillions of dollars into the system, right? They can't make the money fast enough to try to keep this very fragile economy afloat, number one. Number two, they've dropped the interest rates on their loans down to zero. So it costs a bank nothing to borrow from the Federal Reserve, okay? Now, mind you, these mainstream banks were already sitting on money that they were bailed out on years ago. And I'm not knocking any mainstream banks. I have some good friends that work at mainstream banks, but they're sitting on all this money, and again, they're going to give Tom Brady, the quarterback, that PPP loan so that they can get that 3% on the fee. We didn't have that luxury. We had a very specific niche. We wanted to help cooperatives and co-op organizations. It wasn't about the money for us. Number three. Number four, our biggest market, okay? And while I do all lower market income stuff, my stuff's the stuff that gives you the warm fuzzy and makes you feel good. But what pays the bills are the New York co-ops on Manhattan, Upper East Side, and whatnot. And so I feel strongly, because of the low interest rates, us putting in some plans and contingencies, the low interest rates on the co-ops there in New York City, people refinancing, doing improvements, things of that nature. I think that's one of the things that has aided us greatly. Not saying that 6 months from now or 3 months from now, if this thing continues, that we won't take more of a turn. We really set our goals very conservatively. And I think the only reason why we're staying afloat is because of Manhattan being a little bit more fiscally prudent. And then also think about this, Ian, I'm supposed to be in the UK. How much was that trip going to cost my company in flights and food and throwing back a couple pints at a pub, but I'm not paying that now. So again, we're having some savings there as well. And so I think where you see more of the problems in some of the smaller banks. I'll tell you a good story. So minority deposit institutions here in this country, and there are only like 200 or so, run by Latinx people, Black people, Native Americans, were almost about to dry up and go under. Many of them were merging. They were having to close. The day the murder of George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery and Breonna Taylor, I talked to a Black bank the other day, and they're having to turn money away. They're too liquid, now, because everybody wants to give, and this may sound very mean, but I'm going to say it anyway. Now, because everybody wants to do these Black Lives Matters deposits, so that they'll feel better about themselves, and they can put the press release out that says we gave money to Mechanic and Farmers Bank. So, long answer to a very short question, but that's how I think we were able to stay afloat. Still rocky seas, but I don't feel like everyone else has had the same level of opportunity and maybe facing a little bit more problem. But that's what I think, Ian. Great question.
Any other questions from the floor? I'm having a quick look through on that one. Any more questions?
I think we have one.
Graham, do you want to?
Hi there, I'm from Scotland and I'm a small entrepreneur and I'm a co-op member, and because of lockdown I've taken time out to learn all about the co-op, so I've been attending all of your webinars and this is also my first conference. So I've taken it for granted. I mentor a lot of young people. I'm in a learning and development business and I do a lot of mentoring and volunteering during lockdown, so I've been also saying to them, please get involved and please develop your self-awareness. So thank you so much. I haven't coped with lockdown very well, but I've certainly valued everything that I have been picking up because I share all of the values. But I was just taking my membership for granted.
Yeah, it happens. It happens. But, you know, it doesn't, listen, it doesn't matter what age you are. There are so many emerging cooperators out here in the world. My wife didn't know anything about cooperatives until we got married. And, you know, now she knows. I'm trying to pass the same thing on to my 14-year-old. And so, again, you know, we've got to continue and have more intentionality around educating the world about cooperation and being a cooperative and everything else. It's so important. So thank you for your work. Thank you for being here for the first time. I'm here for the first time as well. So we're we're in this together. So again, any more questions? Because again, I want to definitely make sure I'm able to answer all of them. I'm going to send Rory the presentation so you all can have it. And I see where Ian gave me the name of that that thing. We go with.
Yeah,
great.
just to say,
I mean, I think the thing about COVID and everything else that's happening is that sharpening of the fragility of not just sort of our economic systems but our social systems as well. And for me, that's where, you know, cooperatives and collaboration is really coming to the fore. And when it's not without its problems, but that thing about what you were saying about promoting that collaborative way of working and building that community, I think is quite important. Yeah. It is just more than that economic and financial aspect to it as well.
It is. And you'll find, Madam Chairwoman, that people are clamoring for that right now. They want that. You know, I can go to Whole Foods and stand in line to get in, like some people do, or I can go over here to Weaver Street, and while they do maintain, you know, the numbers and whatnot, it's just a warmer welcome. And I feel like I'm contributing. I feel like I'm a part. I feel like I have a say, you know, and I'll say this in full disclosure that the bank also finances Weaver Street in regards to some improvements. We're their bank because they're, you know, I don't walk in with a t-shirt on that says, I bank your store, but at the same time, I feel like I'm contributing to an institution or store that's helping my employer get paid back and benefit my family as well. So it all comes full circle. It really does. And so it really does. So I'm grateful for the opportunity. You all will see me popping in and out of some of the, I'm going to attend the next session as well. And I'm happy to, if it's okay with you, Roy, to stay around for a coffee break.
Yeah.
For additional.
Can I just say there's one or two questions in the chat for you to respond to.
Okay.
There's just a quick one from Maureen saying, can we share your presentation with students? And I'm sure that's a yay.
I will send it to Rory ASAP.
Yeah,
I
and
have
we'll
a
have
copy.
it on the website as well and be able to download that. Nick, I think you've got, I mean, we're up to 3 o'clock. So if you're okay, for 3 minutes after, Nick, you want to pick up on CDFIs, and I think that's a useful point.
My question is, well, you won't have time to answer it because it's quite a complicated question.
So can I just intervene?
What I'd be interested in doing, if you could, John, at some point, is share some more information about how CDFIs work, because I think that's an institution we lack in the UK.
I will.
It's certainly some things that would be really interesting.
I will. Yes, sir, Roy.
And I think there'll be
just to say
opportunities in the workshops as well to do that too. Sorry, Rory.
Yeah, we do need to, can I encourage people to continue conversations in the breakout rooms? So I'm just going to put the first one of these up.
All set. Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much.
Thank you, John. I'm sorry. It's
John.
good to have you, and I'm sure we'll people will want to talk to you more about what's happening. And that was really informative. And I think, you know, the stuff around the CDFIs will be something, and cooperative finance generally is something that we'll want to take up.
Look forward to talking about it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Come on safely, John.
Thank you,
Safe
Nick.
journey home.